the characters that you focus on will become part of you and actually change you.
Welcome to Daring to Tell, the podcast where writers read their true stories of personal daring. Mostly. Then we talk about writing and life. I am your host, Michelle Rado.
Nothing's gonna make me brave. And nothing's gonna make me brave. Nothing's gonna make me brave except doing what makes me scared.
This episode makes me want to quote Renee Magritte's Treachery of Images painting, the one with the picture of a pipe and underneath it scripted words that say, "This is not a pipe." I love Magritte. Today is not a true story. However, I think we'll indeed dip into the arena of personal daring, which I am discovering is pretty much a standard ingredient for anyone who dares to put pen to paper or hover fingertips over little square letters on a keyboard to create the representation of something, maybe even of truth. One funny story that comes to mind I may have told before, so if I did, please bear with me. It is about my mom. From time to time, she discovers a book she really wants to tell me about. This one in particular that I'm thinking of, I don't recall the name of the book, the author of the book, or even the full plot of the book, but she began telling me the story about it with so much enthusiasm that I had to stop her and ask, "And this really happened?" "Oh, no, I don't think so. It's just a story. It was a novel." This is where I discover my enthusiasm sags because, they made it up. But she continued on, and again, I'm kind of making up the whole crux of whatever the story was. But she concluded with something to the effect of, "And so they came home from the funeral, and there, on the radiator, were his shoes." A magical and significant detail that clearly for her brought the whole story together. Perhaps, just my guess here, proving that there is consciousness beyond life on this earth, or that there is life after death, a common theme in my mom's literary yearnings. And, by the way, mine too. "But they made it up," I said to her for about the fourth time as she had relentlessly pushed forward with her story. "But the shoes were there on the radiator." "But they made that up." "Well, still, I found it very inspiring. I think it could be true." Oh, I love my mom. I do. Yet, for today's book, I chose a story related to all these themes. Life after death, starting again, solving mysteries, although of a more hard-boiled variety. Most of all, completely made up by the writer Jody J. Sperling. Jody and I had struck up a bit of a podcasting writerly friendship a while back, and this past year he asked me to read his new book, The 9 Lives of Marva DeLonghi, and to speak with him about it on his podcast, TRBM. I was very honored to do so. So then I thought that the craft and themes used in fiction are not all that much more of a stretch than in memoir. So here we go, daring to tell about fiction. I am very excited to have you back for another episode of Daring to Tell. I guess you were on for a bonus before, but Today we are talking about your book.
Yay.
The 9 Lives of Marva DeLonghi. DeLonghi. I still can't say it right.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, DeLonghi. So,
okay.
I always tell people there's a riff in her name that's a very loose connection to the long goodbye. And so it's DeLonghi. But it's, like I said, just a very loose connection to another brilliant, and mine's not brilliant, but this one is, a novel in the hard-boiled detective kind of genre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I love hearing all the little loose connections
Yeah.
you have, loose or,
Oh, yeah.
allusions to things. And so we're certainly going to talk about some of those today. Fairly recently, I was getting acupuncture done
Ooh.
for ongoing GI things that I
Okay. Yeah.
have that, TMI.
Yeah.
Anyways, there was an air filter. There's some air filter or some sort of device called DeLonghi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I
Wow.
saw that and I was like, hey, does this have a connection to his book?
Now I've got to look it up. It doesn't intentionally. I will tell
Yeah.
you the other connection that wasn't supposed to be there is the kind of secondary main character, Lyle Kopachnik.
Yes.
He appeared in my very first novel, which was more of an autofiction like Brad Listy.
Ah.
And his name was based on Lyle Lovett, whom is like my favorite
Oh.
musician by a country mile. I mean, I just
Oh,
love Lyle
yeah.
Lovett. And so it's a tribute to him. However, my wife, maybe not thinking, or also just in love with Lyle Lovett, we went to see him in concert in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he blew us both away. We got a Great Dane, and
Uh-huh.
without consulting me, she named him Lyle. So we
Oh.
have a dog named Lyle. I've got a character named Lyle. We just love Lyle Lovett, and there's Lyles everywhere.
And did you say it's a Great Dane?
Yeah, he's a Great Dane. Yeah,
So that really matches for your character, who
doesn't
I
it?
picture as this big, hulking, huge kind of guy. That's
Yeah,
very funny.
yeah.
Well, that's one thing is, shall we state the obvious here first? I talk with memoirists on
Yeah.
Daring to Tell. And so my headline here today for everyone is This is not a memoir.
Right.
How could that possibly be?
Yeah.
Michelle is talking fiction with someone.
Yeah.
But I was at this literary salon recently, which was very fun.
Yeah.
It was put on by a writer who I had just met, who by a whole bunch of coincidences happens to live in Maine. And so she was putting this event together. And because it was her first one and we had just met, it was very lovely. And she said, oh, you have a podcast. I'd love to invite you to be our guest. So I got to be the sort of guest of honor for this
Wow.
inaugural event for a little, it was very intimate and it was really fun. But a lot of the discussion is, fiction is another way to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And so when you asked me to read your book, I was very excited and I was like, this is a little different. I usually don't read fiction. I was not even all that versed in the genre called speculative fiction and it's a detective. So I thought, okay, this will be fun.
Yeah.
It was intense. So
Yeah.
I've said this to you before. It kind of, parts of it are, I was like, oh boy, like we'll dig it. We'll talk about that a little bit because there's a lot of blood and guts and scary things.
Yeah.
But the truth that can be told through fiction and the bigger themes, listening to your podcast as I didn't mention, Jody hosts a podcast called TRBM, which I was very thrilled to be a guest for and got to talk with you on your podcast about this book. So we've kind of talked about this in a few places, but in a funny way, we didn't get into so much the origin story stuff. So let me start with how does writing fiction help you in your life? Because I'm always curious about the connections to me, and I feel like for so many writers, writing is about living. And so how is it for you?
Oh, there's so many questions. So it's funny. I just got off a phone call with a close friend of mine. She is a great writer, Heather O'Brien. She's writing the Lockhart Sound and a couple of other novels that are, I think, pulled from her own life. But we were talking about how fiction gives you the ability to escape the expectations of revelation. It goes underneath what you're hoping to get. So if you read a biography,
Hmm.
I want this really very honest rendering of JFK. I mean, I've read so many JFK biographies, or Teddy Roosevelt's another, and I want those to be true. And when I find out that someone like Edmund Morris wrote The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt and that he kind of fictionalized some parts to make it more entertaining, that makes me angry because I
Yes.
want a real rendering. But if you drop TR in a novel, and I know for sure that it's a novel, then I get really excited about seeing that character appear and what you might do with the essence of that person. And I think that fiction is uniquely suited to help us explore ourselves without the consequences of having to get all of the facts correct. Truth and
Hmm.
facts are different. I think it was the late night show host, I can't think of his name right now, came up with the concept of truthiness.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Colbert.
Thank you, Gobert. And I think that in truthiness there is fiction, and fiction lives there really comfortably, but it doesn't mean that there's not fact in it as well. And so I enjoy the play with that. Did I answer your question, by the way?
Well, you know what? You start it has to kind of it has to do with what's real and what isn't. And that is such a big question in writing in general. And
Yeah.
that's I think that you're tapping into one of the big questions, which is to say that often in memoir, I think more egregiously in
Mhm.
biography, as you point out, sometimes there's another book that I know also made stuff up. I'm not gonna cite it
Yeah.
because I can't remember. But
Yeah.
yeah, if there's stuff made up in biographies, you go, what
Yeah.
the heck are we doing here? You
Right.
know, that's a sphere where we are trying to be accurate. And
Hmm.
memoir has come under a lot of scrutiny in the past at least decade, you know,
Yep.
starting with was it A Million Little Pieces or
Yes, absolutely.
a
James
couple of
Fry. Yep.
books at that point. Yeah, and what is true and what feels true. And I think that there are plenty of examples where deeper truth, it's interesting that you say about revelation, because in a
Mhm.
funny way, fiction is sort of more poised
Yeah.
for revelation. So, yeah.
So I guess let me respond to what you're saying, and I still don't know if I'm necessarily answering your question, but back when my wife was very first pregnant, there was a reading at the University of Nebraska Omaha by an author that I just absolutely adore. Her name's Joanne Beard. She wrote a memoir called The Boys of My Youth, and she tackles so many things. And so she came to do a reading. I believe actually it was from a novel called In Zanesville that she was doing the reading from. But I was so excited to meet her. I had a little bit of a crush on her, even though she was far, far older than I was. It just because I read those essays in The Boys of My Youth and I thought this person's mind is so lovely and so like I just
Mm,
immersive. I dive into it.
mhm,
And so I went to the reading, and she was every bit as good as I wanted it to be. Sometimes readers are not particularly compelling, and you kind of wait for the Q&A because then you get a piece of them versus the book feels a little bit rigid and stiff. She wasn't that
mhm,
way. Her reading was great. It was so emotionally filled. And when we got to the end, people were asking the questions. And so rarely will I put myself out in a public setting because I don't want to feel stupid. But in this case, I said, is there ever an occasion for you when you're writing your essays where you fictionalize something to communicate a deeper truth? And I'm going to botch what she said, but the essence of it has stayed with me all this time. She said, yeah, all the time. So she said, for example, there's a spot in my essays where I talk about sitting in a red velvet upholstered chair. And she said, that chair doesn't exist. But I knew that if I did red and I did velvet, that the reader would visualize those two things and that it would be to them much like a laser pointer on what I was about to say. And so
mm,
the sentence, the paragraph, the moment following that was a very poignant moment in her essay. And she did that to make sure that her reader stopped and experienced it. And I thought that is the most truth I can possibly think of. And I'm so glad that she fictionalized that
mhm.
moment for me because I might have missed it if she wasn't so deft at pointing that out.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely see that. And that is, I think, really speaks to the craft too
Yeah.
of writing. Like, how do you bring out imagery that is relevant and meaningful to the subject matter, whether it's true or possibly not, that allows the reader to be in that scene much more. I know that there's a writing teacher who leads a lot of different sorts of classes, and she does one, I think, called Memoir Boot Camp, Allison K. Williams. I don't know
Hmm.
if you know of her. Yeah.
No, I don't think
She
so.
does. She's the editor of Brevity Blog, which is a great
Oh.
blog to check out if you
Now,
have not read it.
this Brevity Dinty Moore, did he actually start it? Is he the founder?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I know
he
Dinty.
does.
Yeah.
He, I think, brought in Allison to be the social media director
Mm.
of the blog, whereas he runs the magazine. I might be
Okay.
getting some of
Yeah,
these
sure, sure.
details a little wrong, but yeah, they're both connected with that. Anyways, what was my point about her? Oh, yes, about imagery and filling a space with physicality, because she came from sort of stage acting, ended up going into the circus of
Oh,
all
wow.
things, but that really helped because she then in reading, she'll really, the way that she works with students and writers is to say, like, where is this person standing when this is, to bring it
Yes.
to life a lot more.
Yeah.
So those are all the ways that the craft helps us to describe what
Yeah.
we have to say. And that is one thing that I think you did brilliantly
Well,
in
thank you.
your novel, in your detective. What am I going to call it, Jody? Is it a novel?
Yeah,
Can I just
it's
call
a
it a
novel.
novel?
Call it a
In your
novel.
novel.
Yep, for sure.
So, I mean, you have Lyle eating a gazillion types of food that
Yeah.
just like have a stomach ache after watching it. I'm like,
Yeah.
how does he live? With a
Yeah.
new piece of fruit in his pocket and all the time,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. But you bring so much action, so much scenery
Hmm.
to everything that's happening. Sometimes horrifyingly so in
Yeah.
some pretty grisly situations, but the craft of the writing helped lend itself to something more. And I guess what I will ask to sort of connect it again back more to you,
Mm.
which is what parts of who you are came out in this book? Like how
Yeah.
does who you are relate to the story of the 9 lives of Marva DeLonghi?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to even give a brief sort of synopsis of the book.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thanks for that little bit of guidance. So the way that I pitch the book to readers, if they've never heard of it before, is it's like The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler meets Groundhog Day, the film with Bill Murray. And so there's a big mystery at the heart of it. And every time that the main character, Luke E. Mia, dies, she has to go back to the beginning moment when she meets her client to try to solve this mystery. And it never is really resolved as to why the magic starts. But as soon as she's able to satisfactorily keep Marva alive, then the loop stops. Okay, so your question was what part of me is in the novel? And it's such a big question because I don't know that this will always be who I am as a writer. But at this time in my life, it's almost as if I fragmented myself into 35 different characters, 50 characters. I mean, there's a lot of names in this book. I'll be honest. There are a lot of
Yeah.
people and they have bit parts.
Yes.
But every person that shows up, I think, represents a piece of me that I really am exploring. And in a funny way, because of that, when people don't love the novel, I take it really personally, not because I think that they dislike the writing or the genre or the style, but because it feels like a rejection of a little piece of me.
Yeah.
And maybe that's true of other novelists. You'd have to have conversations with people along the way to figure out if that's true, because I imagine in memoir, if somebody critiques the memoir, it's got to hurt to be like, that's my life. That is actually my lived experience. And so I think that that's true of this novel as well. So I'll give some examples and interrupt me if you want, because I feel like I could just riff on this for a bit. But
Sure.
so Luke is, and she's never mentioned as being as rabid in her appetites as Lyle, because we're more accepting of smokers and drinkers in this culture for strange reasons. But she's smoking, I mean, it's got to be upwards of
She's
like 90
smoking
cigarettes a
all
day.
the time. Yeah,
It's just,
and she's drinking all the
and
time. I'm like, wait a minute, what
the
time is it?
quantity,
I'm like,
yes, the quantity of booze that she's drinking is physically impossible. But
yeah.
it is a reflection of my addictive personality. My uncle on my mom's side overdosed and died. Um, then her
I'm
other brother
sorry.
overdosed and died as well. So two of her brothers did.
Wow. Oh gosh.
And this isn't like, this is all known stuff. So I'm not revealing
No.
anything for the first time.
Yeah.
But my
Yeah.
mom is addicted to opiates. I have
Mm,
struggled with alcoholism. I've been through AA and continue to try to figure out like what it means to be a person who can be in control
mm-hmm.
of his appetites.
Yeah.
And so
Mm,
Luke represents that, as does Lyle in his eating represent that.
mm-hmm.
The like compulsion to excess is 100% imprinted on me. But there's also this, I think, exploration of, I think this is true. This is a continuing, ongoing belief that even a person who is flawed can be brilliant. A person who's flawed can be feeling and loving and loyal and heartfelt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to make my characters that as well, because that's a question. Even though I'm pretty broken as a person, am I able to contribute something to the people around me? I'm married. I have 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
I try to show up
Mm-hmm.
the best that I can every day.
Yeah.
And I think that those things are all imprinted into the novel. It's like Luke really messes up in some pretty major ways. I know for sure that I was thinking about myself when I would give her every mess up. Then it was
Mm-hmm.
me being able to reflect on myself. So, and then I'll shut up because really I just could go on and on. I quit smoking during the process of actually writing this novel. So when I started writing the novel, I was a
Wow.
cigarette smoker, and about
Uh-huh.
halfway through, it was a 5-year process for me for the 9 lives of Marva DeLonghi.
Yeah.
I switched over to vaping because I didn't want my son to see me smoking cigarettes, and I thought, if nothing
Yeah.
else, I can at least distance myself from that. Like, I don't care if he ends up as a smoker. I'll still love him. I'm not going to judge him, but I want him to be able to choose based on himself. And then slowly I weaned myself off of vaping, and I haven't smoked a cigarette in 36 months or so. So, you know, that's one thing.
That's
Yeah.
huge.
Thanks. Yeah.
Congratulations. I have not been a smoker. My dad
Yeah.
smoked for many years, and I watched from that. I know how hard it is. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's unlike anything, but I do think that the novel itself has a lot of that experience woven into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's very deep, and so thank you for sharing all that. And
Yeah.
and I think in terms of, I have to say, part of why I love memoir and why I love reading in general is I think that we're all flawed, broken
Hmm.
characters in so many different ways. And seeing the humanity through the brokenness is part of what I believe is. I don't usually like to say these things because they sound quite grandiose, but
Yeah.
not the answer, but an answer.
Yes.
I mean, I think to have more compassion and understanding for the brokenness of who we all are, often with ourselves can be one of the hardest ones to do. So,
Yeah.
and I really, I think that doing that in fiction gives you, I'm projecting here, a
Yeah.
little
Please do.
more oomph to like explore that in
Hmm.
a little bit more protected way.
Yes.
So, I don't
It's a
know.
really good point. I believe you and I agree with you. And there may be other novelists or fiction writers who feel differently than I do. But something in memoir that I think is absolutely critical, and going back to Joanne Beard, because I love her work so much, she's discovered some things about life that are just true. And so she's able to write these essays with this like degree of revelation and understanding that
Mm,
help those essays to land. I don't know that I'm at that point in my life. I don't actually think I understand myself quite well enough to write an essay, because in an essay I can't give you a grand conclusion. I can just be like, this is where I'm at. And I do think that may be slightly less compelling, to be honest.
Hmm.
Like I'm in the middle, I'm in the thick of it right now. I don't know
Yeah.
myself very well. I try.
Oh gosh, I could jump off in about a million directions from that one. I
Yeah.
was listening to a podcast just this morning. I love Danny Shapiro's Family
Oh,
Secrets. I don't know if
yeah.
you've ever heard that one. And I haven't listened in a while, so I was able to go back to a prior season and kind of start. And she did an interview with this doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate, I think is how you
Yeah.
say his name. Do you know
Yep.
him? The
I
book is The
do.
Myth of Normal. Well,
Hmm.
one of the things he said in this episode that I like stopped the episode right there and I repeated it to myself like 5,000 times as I continued
Yeah.
my walk. I was almost back home. We are writing about the stuff we need to learn.
Hmm.
I
That's
feel
right.
like that kind of nails it for me
Mm.
and for stuff that I work on. And I think for essays, you don't have to. I think a truth about something right now, I'm not sure there are any grand conclusions ever.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't either. I sense that, and maybe I'm wrong too, but I do sense that when I read a great memoir, a great essay, and even great, let's take that word out of it. When I read one that resonates with me, even like
Mm.
Cheryl Strayed, her big book, it resonated because not only did I feel myself inside of that book, and I wish I remember the title right now, but I also,
Wild.
I thank you, Wild. Yeah, it's a lovely book.
You're
Even though
picking
it's
ones
really
I know.
popular, sometimes I hate like citing one
Yeah.
of the most popular ones, but
No,
it's a good
I
book,
know
and I
what you
really,
mean. I know
yeah,
exactly what you mean. But yes, I like that one too.
yeah, it just captures a sense of me also. I am like you. I can resonate with you, but also I'm so impressed by your ability to just perform an operation on yourself on the table in
Mm.
front of me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I am impressed by fiction because I often say to myself, if I could just make something up, I would do that. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
I don't I mean, on one hand, I know I'm a creative person in many
yeah.
ways, but I often just go, I don't know. How would I make that up? But
Mm,
I think that it can start with a little premise. For
mhm.
example, how do we solve this problem
Yeah,
without dying? So
yeah.
Luke has to figure out this nut that she has to crack in Marva DeLonghi, and
Hmm.
she fails lots of times. So,
Yes.
and there we come to the redemption. And here's another one of my questions. It has to do with like naming people because you had
Mm, yep.
a lot of fun with many names that are
Yes, I did.
wacky, crazy names.
Yeah,
um, but I know that you named her Luke E. Mia
yeah.
for leukemia.
That's
And
right.
so why cancer? Why cancer, Jody?
Oh, such a
What
great
was the
question.
cancer connection?
Yeah, that is a good question. Part of it is fun. Like I just thought, oh, that's
Mm.
leukemia is like a name, Luke E. Mia, and I thought of you can't have the last name Mia and be like a really masculine feeling character to the reader, which is hilarious to me, by the way, because
Mm.
it turns out that all of my negative reviews on the book have either to do with Lyle's eating or Luke's name.
Oh, that's
People,
funny.
I just recently got a note from a guy who bought the book, and he said, I gave it my best effort. I read about halfway through, and I just couldn't keep getting confused about Luke being a female.
Yeah.
And I wrote him back, and there was this moment of irony because he addressed me Jody, Jodi,
Oh,
which is the typical or normal feminine spelling of my name.
right.
Jody is about 85% female and 15% male. And so that in and of itself was part of the naming convention for Luke was give her a masculine name,
Right.
but have her be, I think,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
hope in all the best ways, very feminine. I hope that she's an extremely feminine character. And I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried as hard as I could. And I talked to
Yeah.
numerous women to try to do that, but still
Right.
strong. Um,
Yeah.
so the cancer, though, is I've had multiple people in my family struggle through cancer. A couple we lost, sadly. And my
Sorry.
mom is so far beat cancer. And so I feel like pulling that into the story and having it be actually a joke the whole time. It's always a joke. Every time it comes up, she's not just a Cancer because she was born in July, which is her astrological sign, but she's a Cancer because her name is a Cancer.
Right. It makes first of all, I respect the inclination to sort of like take the ugly thing and turn it into a joke a little bit. There's some like self-disparagement there, which I also recognize is like I'll be the first person to put myself down so that nobody else can do it. Let me beat everyone else to it. It's probably not one of my best traits, but I try to at least be curious and aware, and that's definitely what I see in you and your writing too, is like the curiosity, and I'm going into this and I have awareness. Not to belabor the cancer thing, but I'm trying to think what there was a comedian, we're making all these references here today, perhaps some unsighted, about cancer when it kills a person. Of course, the cancer dies too. I am being like very gallows humor here, and I don't mean to be jokey about it because I totally get that it's not. But again, this theme of coming back from something that kills you again and again and again is also a theme of redemption and resilience and the determination, which I also see, to get something right, to work really hard at something no matter what. So those are the other things that, where does that part come from? Because I see a deep commitment in you, again, sort of from what the book is and what I've heard on the podcast.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about, I was texting back and forth with Heather this morning, the lady who wrote the Lockhart Sound. And I think a lot of it came from this frustration. I have an event coming up in Omaha called Books for Brews. And it's just my effort to try to tell people, hey, I wrote a novel that actually takes place in a real city, and it happens to be our city. And the restaurants and the bars are all real places.
Right.
And I try as hard as I can to love those places, not just to mention them to ground you, but to actually say, hey, Jake's, thank you so much for making a place where I can go and have a beer and smoke a cigar, which again, I don't do anymore, but thank you for making that place that's so wonderful. And Leo's Diner is in the next book, but that's a huge piece. It's even on the cover of the follow-up book. There's Block 16, and there's all these different places. Dos de Oros is a great taco truck, and I try to love them because they're so important to my real world. And so I think I didn't fully answer your question, but
resilience. I'll take off with what you were saying about because I found it very fun for that reason, and I got the sense very much that it was a real place. So those are some of the things that ground us in reality, where we can sort of take off on a wild ride from there on out.
So the resilience piece, thank you for getting me back, is that Books for Brews is going to be a flop. I've got maybe a couple of weeks left to keep advertising for it, but not many people are going to show up. I did get the agreement to partner with Stories Coffee and Block 16 to show up, and to anybody who buys one of my books, I'm pricing them at the cost of a brew of coffee or a brew of beer.
Oh, wow.
So you can buy it. And then, it's basically a freebie, really. Yeah. And that's what I wanted it to be. But in my mind, I knew for sure that this was going to just be a massive hit. And it's not going to be a massive hit. And so I think that that's part of my person, is that I forget the consequences of pain. And that's what makes me able to just keep going on. I start a podcast. It doesn't go well. Instead of quitting, I forget how much it hurts. And I move on to a new way of trying to publicize it and make people hear it and get people's attention. When I write a book and I don't sell 1,000 copies on the first day, I forget how much that feels like a failure, and I try again in a different way to do it. And so that is absolutely central to me as a person. I can't tell you for sure that I will ever have a Stephen King-like audience, but I don't think I'll ever quit.
I'm not sure many people will.
I know, exactly. I know.
But I get the big dreams too. Like I
Yeah.
sometimes live a very wild fantasy of my own life and how fantastic
Yeah.
it's all going to be. But and in ways sometimes it is, in ways sometimes it is not. But
Yeah.
but in terms of, the creative endeavor and connecting with people, which I think is at the heart of what most writers are trying to do in some way, shape, or form, whether or not we're
Yeah.
writing, sort of the question, are we writing for ourselves? Are we writing for an audience? Those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very interesting about forgetting pain, because I think that that's important. Like, in a certain way,
Yeah.
we have to forget pain to move on.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I have experienced physical pain, I've gone to great lengths to try and make myself remember it.
Oh, wow.
I don't really know why.
Okay.
I feel like, why? Why do I have to make it's sort of like I can't forget how bad this was.
Hmm.
But like, here's actually a funny example, because going back to the acupuncturist, for some reason, the first time I went to see her,
Mm-hmm.
she did a thing with a certain channel. Well, that night I went to bed, I was asleep.
Mm.
I got, and again, in the realm of pain, I always have to qualify, people live with far worse pain
Sure. Yep. I'm
every
with you.
day than what I have had. So I'm always just so careful about talking about stuff like this. But I
Yeah.
mean, I've had like Charlie horses in my calf before, but this was like a full leg cramp that started
Oh, yeah.
in my foot, heel, went all the way up through my hip. I mean, I didn't know what was happening, and I was so freaked out. I was like, I don't know what's happening to my body. And it just got
Mm.
so bad. And Phil's like, yep, this happens sometimes. Can you get up? Can you walk
Mm-hmm.
around? And I was like holding onto my foot. I can't move. I can't.
Oh, yeah.
I was so terrified that my body did something completely against my will. I
Yeah.
went back and I was like, I had this horrible thing, and I'm not saying it
Mm.
happened because of the acupuncture, but I think it might have. And
Oh,
she's
wow.
like,
Okay.
well, I'm not sure about that. Like, I probably put her off by even saying that, but um
Sure.
it started to happen again another time, like maybe a few
Mm-hmm.
sessions later. But because I felt it, I like staved it off. I like, okay, I'm not
Okay.
going there again.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I think about it, I've kind of forgotten just how bad it is. And part of me goes, all
Yeah.
right, if I have to go through that again because some kind of
Mm.
treatment would be for a greater good,
Yeah.
maybe that would be worth it. So, as if I had that kind of power to choose what trade-offs I will accept.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have control over these things. But
Yeah.
what was that related to?
Well, we were talking about, pain and the
Yeah.
ability to forget pain.
Resilience. Yeah.
Resilience.
Yeah. How about it? Do you want to read now? Why don't we have you read?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. All
and
right.
I asked you to read something that actually comes quite late in the book. It's a couple pages, chapter 32,
Yeah.
which is probably maybe the start of the last quarter of the book, shall we say.
Yes.
So we kind of have given away, it's not a secret, that Marva, DeLonghi, and Luke, and all the people in this book have multiple lives. So this is deep into
Yeah.
quite a few of the lives. We won't give away quite how many, although maybe you
Yes.
say so. Any other setup before we hear?
No, I think that's a great setup. I mean, we've talked about this book as a detective mystery, and so every step along the way should reveal like a small nugget more about what's coming and what's going to happen. And but yeah, I love that you picked this chapter because this is such a meaningful personal moment to me. But yeah, I'll take off when you say go.
Okay. And so there are a couple of characters in here. We introduced
Yep.
people to Luke. We introduced people to Lyle. There's
Hmm.
the guy who's carrying us through this chapter as a doctor because Luke is in the
Yes.
hospital. There's a
Yep.
reference to the cookie burglar who is a
Yeah.
recurring character. But aside from those folks, I don't think that, just kind of go with it.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. Okay.
Yeah. You're going to get a really good sense if you're listening to the kind of book it is. And I think that this doesn't have any major spoilers, so that's really fun too.
Okay. All right. Whenever you are ready, Jody, go ahead.
The following morning, a parade of nurses and doctors marched through my room. Dr. Christopher talked about me like I was absent, deaf, or dead. He used $5 words as if he owned $1 million dictionary. Her body is inimitable in the annals of medicine. See here evidence of multiple fatal wounds, none which managed to slay her. We find no remediation for shattered lumbar vertebrae, no treatment for bullet shrapnel in her temporal or sphenoid bones, though an MRI indicated at least 2 bullets penetrating the cranium. She sustained heavy scarring in her lungs from ammonia inhalation, and though utilization of all 4 limbs can be demonstrated, internal scarring and bone fragmentation suggest dual femoral amputation. No less curious are the bruises of her throat. The depth of 2-inch subdermal would indicate tracheal trauma commensurate with manual strangulation within the past 48 hours. Yet, the presence of ammonia vapors contradicts those findings, appearing nearly at parallel chronology. Dr. Christopher glowed as he approached his hypothesis. Her ability to heal suggests experimental medicine. Given the absence of procedural documentation, all tests support some form of undocumented regenerative therapy. Of course, what we expect to find is that this woman has been treated under an alias, which, when we ascertain, could establish medical chronicity. But until then, we must operate with the scholarship at hand, considering only the evidence her traumas raise, false positives from multiple suicide attempts. The images of Miss Mia's body indicate unique cellular pathways, a most fascinating discontinuity, a new branch of lymphatic evolution. Additionally, it provides primary avenues for inquest and interrogation regarding mental health and its relative impact on human survival. Periodically, a nurse, accompanied by several orderlies who appeared eager to wrestle should I attempt escape, would transfer me into a wheelchair and roll me into Bright Room, where technicians in lead-lined vests microwaved my body. Who knew you could empathize with a corn dog? On the third day, they moved me to a 2-patient room with open access. Everything in the room was affixed to the walls or floors by metal brackets and heavy screws, but otherwise freer than my previous accommodations. The second bed in my room lay empty. Daily, nurses administered medicated oxygen to rehabilitate my lungs. An ENT spent hours with me producing a post-treatment care regimen. Toward the end of the first week, an OR doctor took me to the first floor, put me under, and removed shrapnel from my skull. When I was returned to my room, the headache throbbing behind my eyes felt like punishment for every foolish decision I'd ever failed to make. Following a week of minor surgeries and respiration therapy, I felt stronger than I had in years, whatever that meant in the context. Dr. Christopher said my vitality was also likely a symptom of sobriety, noting my liver and kidneys showed acute damage from alcoholism. I didn't plan to quit drinking if the choice was mine, and if I would have smelled smoke on anyone's jacket, I might have licked the fabric while clawing at the pockets for a cigarette. Midway through the second week, Dr. Christopher appeared in my room after hours. He tended to appear in his final rounds between 5 and 6 p.m., but somewhere around the 10th day he dropped in after dinner. By then, I'd graduated to level 2 and ate with my peers, who all smelled as crazy as they acted. I just returned from dinner, wondering if I'd misidentified the serial burglar when Dr. Christopher's form filled the jam of my room. His arrival startled me out of a deep thought. Facing the door, I sat on the floor in the corner. He stood there, looking down on me. I need to tell you something, but you've been thriving in your treatment, and I worry. I already know. Lyle's dead. He's in a coma. But Marva DeLonghi. Does that mean you don't think I'm crazy? Crazy is never the word I would have used. Do you believe my story? No. Dr. Christopher scratched his chin. I don't believe the properties of linear time function any differently for you. I don't believe you've ever died. But I can acknowledge you knew something important. His ear, scratch, scratch. I erred in dismissing your warnings on the basis that you suffered from psychosis. You still think I'm psychotic? Not exactly, but if you're working your way up to an apology, I don't care. Lyle's as good as dead. Marva is dead. I wanted to say, I won't be far behind, but I didn't need to distract Dr. Christopher, so I scratched his ego. Tell me how it happened. Someone attacked and murdered Mrs. DeLonghi at Regency, just as you said. Scratch, scratch his forehead. Mr. Kapichik was wounded defending her. Kapachnik. I corrected him absent-mindedly. Defending her? Dr. Christopher adjusted his eyeglasses and scratched his upper lip. The police failed to detain the suspect, but they're conducting a citywide search as we speak. Of course. How? He said an ongoing investigation was underway. Eyewitnesses at the mall described a tall, tattooed man assaulting Marva DeLonghi. He carried a heavy axe. The owner of Christian Noble Furs said Lyle had spotted the attacker moments before the man entered the store. A brief scuffle ended when Lyle was knocked unconscious by the dual end of the axe. The attacker then confronted Marva. After murdering her, he fled. Lyle sustained brain damage. He would never recover beyond a vegetative state. The police? Dr. Christopher scratched his chest. I don't know how to say this. Scratch, scratch. Have opened a homicide investigation. They've requested an interrogation regarding your prior knowledge of Marva's situation. Fragments from a lifetime of dreaming pulsed through my mind. There wasn't enough air in the world to fill my lungs. I had nothing to do with any of this, but I wasn't sure. Try mapping a reliable alibi from the psychedelic soup of my life the past days. Try even finding language to explain what a day looks like when death and resurrection feature prominently in the timeline. What can I tell them that I haven't already said? Dr. Christopher scratched his hand. They think you might have involvement with the man they're hunting. If I didn't find a way out fast, I was going to be starring in primetime Manhunt, framed as an accomplice and kept on round-the-clock surveillance. I'm a victim in all this. Why can't anyone see that? Dr. Christopher stood quietly, eyes fixed on the wall. You'll forgive me, scratch, scratch, if I doubt your claim. The victim paradigm is common in many mental illnesses. But the truth is, you knew the location and approximate time of a gruesome murder. You'll forgive me if I don't buy the scientific mumbo-jumbo. There's a perfectly good explanation for everything that's happened. I mean, do you really think my partner would have been trying to prevent a murder I had a part in planning? Does that make any sense? I've already told you what does make sense, but you refuse to believe because it doesn't fit your predetermined understanding of the world. I scanned the room for a pack of cigarettes I knew wasn't there. So do your worst, because it's clear you haven't listened to a word I've said. Dr. Christopher turned his head and fixed me with eyes for a long time, scratching his elbow. Finally he stood. I'm sorry. He left the regret open-ended. It turns out we can't prevent much. I don't want to wax philosophical, but it took a great deal of failure for me to resolve myself of blame. I watched Lyle die so many times, every time I thought I could stop it, but he had to die. It was written in the script. Don't ask me who writes the script. I don't know the answer, but I know there are dramatic rises and climactic falls, endless falling. If events derail, if the story goes off script, life can erase a page and start fresh. Start from the moment before we enter our office, return our belongings and our loved ones, but never deliver our dearest hopes.
Well, I hope you wax philosophical more
Yeah,
often.
thanks. Ugh, yeah.
How does it feel to read
Yeah,
it?
it's very emotional for me, if I'm honest. Thank you for
Yeah.
picking that chapter. I don't know
Yeah.
that I would have picked it for myself. And as I was reading it, I was feeling a lot of. I would say the thematic heart of the book is in that chapter, and sort of shocked that you found that. It means a lot to me.
I'm glad. It was I have to say it's the one that sort of like appeared in lights when
Yeah,
I read it. I was like, okay, here's something. Here's something.
thank you.
There's a lot of great writing in this book. There is a lot of great plot and there's a lot going on,
Yeah,
but these are some of the themes that I feel like you're really working
yeah,
on. And I really, really commend you for it
thanks.
because it's a big it's a big thing. You must have had to do a ton of research for
Yeah,
this because there's a lot of like, this was a hospital scene,
mm,
but there's a lot of anatomy things
yeah.
and, did you do a lot? I'm being very vague
No,
about
not at all.
all the grisly stuff,
Yeah.
but was there a lot of research involved in writing this?
Yes and no. So some of the research comes from the life that I've lived. So my mom knew that she wanted to be a nurse from an early age, and
Uh,
so I grew up.
uh-huh.
She was a NICU nurse from literally the day I was born until about 18 months ago. She finally retired, but I knew a fair amount about the medical profession from her, and then she always really recommended highly the lifestyle that comes with being a nurse, because you can do maybe 3 12-hour shifts a week and then get 4 days off. And so I started college to be a nurse. I was going to be a bariatric nurse, because they always need bariatric nurses. If you're out there and you're listening and you're on the fence, bariatric
Oh.
nursing is really important. It's well paid.
What I have to ask, what is
Uh,
that, Barry? Yeah, I feel like I should
No, not
know.
at all. And it's good that you don't. So bariatric nurses are specifically for people who have weight issues. So it's anything that
Oh.
is people who are, and I use the word gross not in like disgusting, but grossly overweight. That is where bariatric nursing comes in.
Mhm.
And
Right,
it is
you
it's a
okay.
physically challenging kind of nursing to be involved in, but it's very needed right now, and a lot of people
Mhm.
won't get into it. And so I started out thinking that's what I was going to do, and discovered that as much as I really love people, I actually found nursing boring. I know that sounds crazy, but I was bored, and I would do some of my shifts when I was
Hmm.
toward the end of that degree, and realized that 8 of the 12 hours were just me trying to entertain my brain, because there was nothing going on and nothing I needed to do. And
Wow.
so that was when I switched
Yeah.
out, because I thought you
Interesting.
need just more compassion than apparently I had, or something.
Hmm.
And that's one example of a few.
Well, it wasn't meeting your challenge, it
Yeah.
seems, either. Like, you always talk about liking to take on
Yes.
challenges and learn new things, and so if it started getting boring, I can
Yes.
see,
Yeah.
like, this is not gonna cut
Yeah.
it.
For
Yeah.
for a career that felt very true to me. So at the same time, I just want to say to all of the nurses out there, it's nursing and teaching, in my opinion, are the two absolutely most necessary professions.
Hmm.
And they're never glamorous, and they don't pay what they ought to. And so for the men and
Hmm.
women who teach and who nurse, I just have so much
Mhm.
admiration. It's a very noble thing to do.
Yeah. So was that part of even why you went in this detective direction? Like that was a world you felt comfortable like populating with knowledge, imagery,
Yeah, that's a more challenging question, because the truth is that the first book I wrote, I mentioned earlier, is the stories of Bogey, and that really was autofiction. So the perspective character is partly me and partly a character named Bogey, and much of that book I wrote as it was happening to me. So I would write my day and turn
Hmm.
it into kind of a plot. But what I realized at the end of it was, despite my thesis advisor really praising the book and loving it, I couldn't find a literary agent. And at that time in my life, I didn't realize that self publishing was maybe a viable option. And it might not have been at that
Mhm.
time. Maybe, I don't know, this is a totally different conversation. But at any rate, I set it
Mhm.
aside and I looked at what was maybe commercially viable. And I realized that I had some interest in
Right,
writing
right.
a detective story, and I knew that that was commercially viable. So that was more of a me thinking my deepest dream is to be an author who can actually support himself and his
Hmm.
family with his words. And
Yeah,
so I chose detective fiction to do that. And irony is, I got the
yeah.
literary agent. Annie Baumke is an amazing human being, and she made the book infinitely better than it was when I sent it to her. But we could never find a publishing deal that made sense. We got one offer at the end of a 3-year search, and it was going to be for the spring of 2025, which is obviously not even yet. I
Yeah.
did finally decide. I looked at my wife and I said, "This is the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened." But I'm going to part ways with Annie and self-publish. So yeah, I wrote a detective story because I thought I could sell it.
Yeah.
But saying that, I love writing detective stories, and I have no shame about that. So the
Oh,
discovery was wonderful.
nor should you.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. And I give the highest praise and kudos to people who are really making a go for,
yeah,
you are raising a family to earn a living doing writing is no small
no,
task. So, yeah, since you have this deep both curiosity and desire to learn, grow, I think detective novels
hmm,
are like the
yeah,
perfect fertile ground for that because you can just keep going and going and going. And hey, you picked a theme where
yeah,
resurrection, like people keep coming back. So it does lend itself to many continuing
yep,
stories. What have you learned most? What's your big takeaway in this book that you're doing differently? Because
mm,
I know you're working
yes,
on more already,
yeah.
right? So how's the next stuff
Okay,
going?
so just briefly, I meant when I wrote this book for it to stand alone. One of my favorite novelists just recently died. His name is Cormac McCarthy,
Oh, yeah.
brilliant
Yeah.
author, and he wrote this book called The Road. And
Yeah.
I read it a certain way based on my own life experience, and it's easily among my favorite books. But a lot of people who read it feel like it's depressing, and I recognized at some point along the way that the book reads you as much as you read the book. However, you come into the book, that's how you're going to perceive the end. And so uh,
Mm.
I wanted to do that with the Nine Lives of Marva DeLonghi. But again, there was actually an inflection point where I said, I need to support my family, and a series makes sense. And these characters aren't dead to me. So let's see where they go. And that does force a choice at the end of the book. If you do read the book, you'll know why it's a bit ambiguous what really happens until you realize there's a series. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that
Yeah.
the reason that I say that, I apologize. I build these giant structures in my head and then I forget where I'm going. uh,
I feel you on that one too, believe
yeah,
me.
bring me back to ground really
Wait,
quickly.
where was I
Yes,
going? All
exactly.
the diversions.
Yes,
That's
I
all
know.
right.
Yeah,
No. So what's next? Like
yeah.
what were your lessons, Jody?
Yes, thank you. So, a couple of things, just real world, is people don't respond really well to Lyle eating. So, are there ways that I can continue to keep that character and yet make it slightly more palatable? And I think that that's part of the learning process is saying Lyle is always going to be the guy
Mhm.
who eats an absurd amount of food. But if there are ways that I can use that more intentionally than I realized I needed to, it'll make a better book.
Mhm.
Pacing is really important. I didn't know when I wrote this book that a lot of people would feel like you don't get a ton of character development because of the restructured lives. Like a lot of people read that and don't
Mm.
think that your characters are progressing. To me, they were. And so I've learned a little bit about that. Those are just some of the technical craft parts of the question. However,
Yeah.
um, I will say this to anybody who writes, whether you're writing memoir or biography or novel, the characters that you focus on will become part of you and actually change you. And when I dove into this, I had a friend in my undergraduate program who dared me to write a character who was the opposite of who I was at that time. And so at the beginning of graduate school, I would say, a fairly devout Protestant Christian with very strong Christian beliefs all around. And so I think that one of the truths of the Christian faith is that they really have a male centric view. the man is supposed to be the head of the household and that the woman is subservient. And that was the world I grew up in. It was the world I believed. And through writing Luke, I took up his challenge and I'm forever changed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably still rough around the edges. I'm still learning things. But having gone on this experience with Luke and learning a little bit about the way that women think, that's where I did most of my research, by the way, going back to your previous question
Yeah,
is
yeah.
I ask women
Right.
all the time, does this feel like a woman to you? Is her thinking accurate? And many women who have read it have felt like it feels like a woman. And so I'm proud of that, but also again, going back to that thing, like I'm humbled by the experience. To be a woman is, and again, I can't say this from experience, but just living through Luke, like, is so hard and so demoralizing sometimes just to be a woman.
Mm,
And I didn't know that for my whole life. And so I
yeah.
learned a lot
That's
about
funny.
that. And yeah.
I felt that through her. Yeah. And I'll say, I think it is. I mean, this is called Daring to Tell, and I think it is so brave to take on writing
Mm,
a character of, first of all, someone who is the opposite of you in any
yeah.
way at all, a character of a different gender, which I think is very brave to do. Anne Patchett did that
Yeah.
when she wrote is it The Dutch
Yep.
House? It's
That's right.
the
The boy.
character is
Yeah.
male. Yeah, and I was like, I'm just stunned. I was stunned when she did it,
Hmm.
and I know writers have done
Yeah.
that through time. It's not like it's, unique, but at the same time, I go, that's so hard. I can't imagine. Like I am when you say about like first of all, I think I would be terrible at writing anything from the perspective of a man.
Mm,
So I don't imagine things in that way.
yeah.
But to the point of character development, I think that any writing does include character development. And the character I'm most interested in developing is me
Yeah.
because I go, I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, I am realizing through the course of my life, I am grateful to have lived long enough that I start having the point where I go, who am I
Hmm.
really? Like, my writing is about learning to trust myself and understand who I am. And I can see how that through characters is a similar endeavor.
Yeah.
So, again, going back to kind of these inclinations through fiction and nonfiction, those happen in different ways. And so that's just fascinating.
Mm,
So I again say commendations on taking it on.
thanks.
Congrats. It's funny you say about being hard to be a woman because I think, oh, it's quite easy,
Oh,
which is not fair either.
sure.
All
Yeah.
of these are one person takes.
Yep.
Another writer I had on recently, I probably won't quote her exactly, but Charlotte Maya, who wrote a brilliant, beautiful memoir called Sushi Tuesdays about the suicide death of her husband.
Oh,
I mean, talk about
yeah.
difficulties to live through. One thing that she says, I believe late in the book, is there is only one story and they're all different.
I love that.
And that's kind of how I feel about,
Hmm.
that's why I feel like everyone has a story to
Yeah.
tell. Anyways, now I've lost my point again too about coming through. Oh, just writing from the perspective of a different gender.
Hmm.
That's that's really brave.
Thanks.
Oh, and what you're going to be doing next. Oh, okay. So I have one
Yeah.
more question and then I promise I'll let you
Oh,
go.
great.
When you think about character development, another thing that has been a common interest on both of our podcasts has been the Enneagram.
Oh,
Have
yeah.
you used that in the course of thinking about your characters and where their centers of intelligence are and where their energy
Yeah.
goes? Like, because I think, I mean, I love it. I find it completely
Hmm.
compelling and interesting to um, just to help me think about me. But I can see how, for a writer, it would also be a huge kind of another resource, like a way to think about character development.
Yeah. So I have not used the Enneagram to actually develop the characters. It's a newer thing that I discovered kind of after. So midway through the eight ball is when I really started to get involved in that and thinking about it. It's a brilliant thing. I'm assuming,
The Eight Ball is your next book?
yeah, eight ball Magic of Suzy Q is out, and
Oh, congrats.
oh,
I didn't
thanks.
know
Yeah,
that.
no, it's been a fun journey, and I'm working on the 24/7 of a Russian named Breskov. But yeah, I if you could see the documents that I have about my characters, it's not exactly a Enneagram, but I create a document. It's a living document. It does change a little bit as I start to understand them better myself, because there's a funny part that, like, for example, in the Nine Lives of Marva DeLonghi, there's a character named Annie who's a bartender, and that was actually before I got my agent Annie Baumke. But when I wrote her, she was sort of a one-off character, not a real person who tended bar at Jake's, but just this like idea of a person. And she has had a recurring role in each of the subsequent novels, and so now I've written her into the outline of the fifth book in the series, where she's going to have like a kind of a consequential piece. And so I
Mm,
think that that's true of fiction in a way, is that sometimes a person exists and you don't understand that they're going to become important to you. And it's because they speak to you on the page in this very limited moment. And you realize that their outlook is surprising to you.
mm,
I think it's weird
mm,
about writing in general. And I'm sure that you could relate to this. In fact, I sense it when I read about the caterpillar in the moth, or excuse me, in the butterfly. I sense that surprise from you. You had no clue
mm,
what you were actually doing until it happened to you, and you were just like, this is profound, and you wanted to share it with the world.
mm.
So that is like that minor character stepping into the page, and you have no clue how important they will be. But when they do, they awe you, and they don't feel like your creation. They feel like somebody who walked into your life and then
Yeah,
just
yeah.
asked you to tell their story. So
Isn't that
yeah,
amazing?
it is. Yes, it's surreal.
That's something that I've heard writers say for so long,
Hmm.
and I never really got that. But the other writer I have just absolutely fallen in love with most recently is Abigail Thomas,
Hmm.
who has so many, she has quite a few memoirs out. She is, I, I feel like I very much relate to her approach, which is like if I don't know what the end, I don't know the ending of a book. I don't know. I
Yeah,
write to figure something out, and so that character development is kind of the same thing that I would always be like, how can you not know? But
yeah,
it is that exploration on the page.
yeah.
Oh, Jody, this has been very fun. So, okay, the one
Very.
more question. This is it.
Yep.
One more. And you probably know what it is. What was most daring about? What was most daring about, maybe not even just the nine lives, or maybe
No,
nine
yeah, yeah.
lives. What was most daring about this for you? About writing the book for you?
Oh, I want to have a great answer right now. I wish I did have something on deck for you. Um, Standing up again. I really do believe that. Uh, I hope when all the math is done, Michelle, I hope so much that I'm just standing up, because I think it's really hard to keep standing up. Uh,
What do you mean by that?
the amount of work that goes into writing is more than I think most people know.
Yes.
And there may be pockets of the country where being an artist or a writer or a thinker or an intellectual or any of those things is more accepted and not necessarily looked at strangely. But in the world that I inhabit,
Hmm.
um, being a yeah, it's probably true of everybody. I'm just saying, I maybe somebody listening right now is like, I've never experienced this before, and that's great on you. But
I don't know.
to be a writer is to be laughed at, until you pay the bills and drive your Lexus. And I'm never going to buy a Lexus, by the way, but until that happens from your writing income, everybody says, "How cute! That's so cute."
Hmm.
So that's what I mean about getting up, because
Interesting. Yeah,
every single
yeah.
day I get up and I
Doing it.
keep going. Um, and so that's what's most daring about writing this novel, is that I did take the feedback that people weren't ready to read Jody, the philosopher who wrote the stories of Bogey, but maybe they'll read Jody, the detective novelist who spins a yarn about a crazy, heavy drinking, heavy smoking, crude, violent detective. And I don't know where the road takes me next, but that's just the continued journey is I'm not going to stay down. You can knock me down, but you can't
Yeah.
keep me down. And that's all I can tell you so far.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. It has been my pleasure yet again to have another conversation with you. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
I've been thinking more about that pain thing. Why I feel the need to remember pain. And I think it's tied into the reason why I love memoir so much, why I love reading people's true stories. And I think that it's because there is so much pain in this world that comes for every one of us. Not pleasant to think about, but it is true. And a couple of things spring out of that reality. On one hand, it certainly means that when life is being kind, we should enjoy it. And I definitely try to do that. I think you hear it in the essays that I read. I really try to appreciate the wonder and beauty of the world. Yet it just never fully leaves my brain the thought of, okay, what's going to happen next? And I love reading people's stories of how they get through all the incredibly difficult situations that they go through and how they start over. I do think that this word resilience has come to be pulled out at every turn these days, and I can see why. It's a very important value. But the real work in starting over is just so slow and so hard and takes lots and lots of practice in many different ways. So these are some of the things I'm thinking about these days, and what Jody's book made me think about too. Trying to do the same things over and over, ever so slightly different, in order to get some experience other than pain. Maybe this resonates with you? I so hope that it does. Thank you for listening to another episode of Daring to Tell. I have a newsletter I put out once a month. It is called Hit Pause. It's about some of the things that I continue to ponder after putting out each month's episode. You can sign up for it at my website, michellerado.com. Thank you to my husband, Phil Rado, for his music that I use for my theme, Make Me Brave. Most of all, thank you for daring to listen. I will catch you next time.
And nothing's gonna break my fall. There's nothing in the protocol. It's like swimming up waterfall or taking away the ground. Taking away the ground. It's like taking away the ground.